All right, we are right at 6:30, so I'll call tonight's Truth and Taxation hearing to order. And Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Munson.
Here.
Councilmember Byström.
Here.
Councilmember Husnick.
Here.
Councilmember Valento.
Here.
And Mayor Bain.
Here, I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, we have an agenda before you. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our agenda is approved. For those in attendance tonight, tonight is our annual Truth and Taxation hearing. We will start with a presentation from staff and then move into an opportunity for public comment, after which council will bring the conversation back to council, and council will be asked to consider the resolutions that are on tonight's agenda. So if you're here to speak, you'll have an opportunity to speak. We will just do that after staff has had an opportunity to present. And Karen, do we have anybody online?
Do not.
Okay. And help me remember to check that as we get to the actual public hearing portion. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick and Kevin to walk through the presentation for this evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll be taking on this presentation tonight, just going over our budgets that we've worked on since August of this year. This to start off with, I want to thank the council and city staff for all the input and assistance in putting this budget together, and we feel we have a very good budget put together for you. So I'll go over some of the highlights in this presentation. Okay. The meeting requirements for this Truth and Taxation hearing is just to provide a summary of the budget for 2023. So we'll go over all the funds that the city has and all the different budgets that are associated with those funds. We'll also provide a summary of the proposed tax levy for 2023. This will include the general fund, which is the operating fund of the city, as well as any other tax levies that the city has and their purpose of what those levies are for. And then after this presentation, we will also, as Mayor Bain said, have an opportunity for any public input that they have before any budget or levy is approved. So this slide summarizes all the governmental funds of the cities. So this is all the city's funds with the exception of the water and sewer fund, which are enterprise funds, which we'll look at on the next slide. So in total, the budgeted revenue for all funds here is about 21.4 million, with expenditures being about 21.2 million. So overall, revenues are exceeding expenditures of about 190,000 for these funds. Just to hit some of the funds, the top row is the general fund. That is the main operating fund of the city. This accounts for the majority of the city staff wages, along with all the general operating and level of services expenditures that the city has for a given operating year. So as you can see, the change in fund balance is zero, leaving the fund balance to remain the same as it was from the prior year. This is a good budget practice to always be budgeting revenues equaling expenditures, and that is what's being proposed in this budget. And we're going to get into some of those details on some slides coming forth. The next fund this touch base on is a park dedication fund. You can see there's a projected decrease of 363,000. This fund is being looked at with the park master plan and will be looked at closely moving forward into 23 and then when we prepare for the 2024 budget. But this does meet the needs of what the city is projecting for 2023. And as you can see, even though at that decrease, there still is a fund balance in that fund for any expenditures that may come up. The next fund that I want to touch base on is a capital improvement fund. You can see there that fund has a decrease of 687,000. This was part of our big push in this year's budget, was creating 10-year capital plans. So this was one of those funds included in that 10-year operating plan. So even though there is a decrease, you can see that there is a fund balance of 1.6 million. And when we look at the 10-year plan for this fund and projecting out future expenditures, as this fund holds expenditures related to improvement projects, streets repair, streets maintenance and street repairs, street infrastructure costs, that fund balance is healthy to maintain those, to be able to fund those sources moving forward. The next one to touch base on is the capital equipment fund. You can see this one has a pretty significant increase of $1 million. This one also did have a 10-year projection out, and when looking at the fund and the status of how the city wants to pay for this equipment and also the future city and capital equipment needs that the city has, to be able to fund those purchases as they come due, instead of having to borrow funds from the debt, was an initiative that the city proposed with this fund. So seeing that increase is getting that fund balance to a level where the city will be able to maintain and purchase those equipment needs with cash instead of possibly having to take out debt, with the exception of fire trucks. The other large portion of this budget is the debt service funds. This is bonds that have been taken out to fund city infrastructure. So these are the requirements on the tax levy needed to make those debt payments as they come due. There is one new fund up there. It's called the Debt Service Equipment Certificate Fund. The city is planning on issuing equipment certificates in 2023 for the purchase of 2 fire trucks and also 2 snow plows. This slide looks at our water and sewer fund, our 2 enterprise funds of the city. You can see that the ending net position is healthy, being at 16 million for the water fund and about 14.6 for the sewer fund. These funds operate a little bit differently than the funds we just went over, where these funds pay for all their capital needs and all their debt service requirements as well. These funds are extensively looked at as well on a 10-year plan for what the rates need to be with these funds to maintain operation and also fund those capital needs and debt service requirements. So even though there is a rather large decrease here, looking at the 10-year plan of those funds is setting these funds up for success on a going forward. This graph on the next slide, this summarizes where the majority of the revenue is coming in from the city. Again, this excludes all enterprise funds. I also excluded the TIF funds in this revenue chart. So there's a couple of things to point out here. When we look at the total levy when we look at the total revenues and what the levy is, the levy accounts for about 62% of the revenue from the city as a whole when we look at these funds. One thing to note too, to purchase those fire trucks and also those snow plows in 2023, equipment certificates will be issued or plan to be issued if the budget is approved for about 2.3 million. So that's accounting for just under 11% of the revenue this year to help fund those purchases. Given the current status of the equipment fund and then also the rather large dollar amounts tied to the fire trucks, to have enough cash on hand to pay for those fire trucks is not in the best interest of the city. It's better to issue those equipment certificates when they are needed. The next slide goes over the expenditures for the same funds, excluding TIF and the enterprise funds. Again, you can see the largest portion of the expense in the city is with the general fund being at about 55%, just under that amount. That is the operating expenditures of the city. That is the city staff wages, the supplies, repairs, and operating needs that the city is required to maintain the level of service that the city council and city want to have for the citizens of Forest Lake. After that, the largest expense of the city is those capital needs, street infrastructure, capital equipment, and vehicles needed to help support those functions of the daily operations of the city. The next slide breaks down the operational budget of just the general fund. To note here, the wages account for about 8.1 million of the budget for the general fund, or about 71% of the budget. That's pretty common percentage when I look at cities for comparison for how those operations need. It also is what the staff levels are required to, again, maintain that level of service. The biggest portion is the police budget, just accounting for about 43% of that budget. That is mostly strictly the wages, as we do have many officers out there on the street to help patrol and keep the city safe. And that also includes all the fire wages as well. Next, this slide is going to look at our tax levy. When we looked at what our tax levy was for 2022, it was about $12.2 million. Our proposed levy in the budget is about 13.1 million. That is about a 6.9% increase and an $847,000 increase. The city did start at a proposed levy in September of about 7.52%. Through some updated projections and updated numbers that the city has, we were able to get this down to that 6.9% level there. So with the proposed levy where it currently sits, this is the effect that it's going to have on the values of homes. To point out that first line item of $366,250, that's the first line I'm on there. When we looked at the numbers that the county gave us, the average home price market value price was a $287,000 in the prior year. So given what everyone knows what happened to the values of houses, it was estimated that that house went up about 27.6%. So that number is reflected in that dollar figure. So that first line item, the taxes are going to go up to just the city portion of taxes, mind you, this not including any school district or county levies, but just the city portion of the levy is going up to about $1,281, which will be an increase of about $150. The next line item for a market value of home will go up about 111 and so forth from there. So the average homeowner in the city could expect somewhere from about $110 to $150 increase in their property tax levy in 2023 compared to 2022.
Maybe worth just pointing out the header on proposed 2023 tax impact. It's actually, that's the total tax, so the impact would be the difference between the two. Am I catching that right?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes. Well, this next slide breaks down where that levy goes. The majority goes to the general fund at 71.5%. This is the operating portion of the city budget that we've discussed before. Most of the city labor costs sit here, any materials and supplies that are needed to provide that level of service in the city. The capital equipment fund accounts for just under 7% of that. That is going to fund the purchases, all the capital equipment and vehicle purchases that the city has, excluding any vehicles or equipment in the water and sewer fund. The plan for this fund, as mentioned before, is to fund all those purchases with cash and fund balance, with the exception of the fire trucks as it was outlined in our 10-year plan for this fund. The Parks and Trail Fund has a levy of $50,000, so it accounts for this 0.4% of that levy that will be reviewed closer once the Parks Master Plan is updated and finalized for how the city will fund any future parks and trails going forward. There also is a levy dedicated to the Capital Improvement Fund. This fund helps fund any street repairs, street infrastructure projects that keep the cities in operating condition. A large portion of the funding in this fund also comes from municipal state aid that is also in this fund, and then also the city franchise fees go into this fund as well. Next is the debt service that accounts for just over 18% of the levy. These are bonds that were issued to help fund infrastructure projects in the city. So those are the levies that are required to meet those debt service requirements as outlined in the bond documents. And then there's also a levy of $150,000 in the Economic Development Fund. This is the operating revenue in that fund to help with any economic development needs and initiatives. So this next slide looks at where the tax levy increase percentage has been over the past 8 or so years. You can see the past 4 years have been relatively consistent in speaking, ranging from 5% to just over 7%. With the increasing costs of the cost of living increases as outlined in our union contracts, as well as all the other increasing costs, as we're all aware of, this to keep up with those demands. This percent is where this percentage of levy came in. The goal of the city is always to make sure to keep that level of service in mind, but also making sure we provide that benefit to the city and keeping that percentage as low as possible. The last slide we'll go over is just a history of the tax rate. The city has been very consistent the past few years, just hovering right around that 40% tax rate. With the values of all the homes significantly increasing, as we discussed before, that is what's causing the decrease of the estimated 35.404 in 2023. I would expect as the market of the houses kind of start to level back down, those values self-adjust, that the city would be right in line with where it has been consistently the past 4 or 5 years. With that, I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments that the city council may have.
Thank you, Kevin. Open it up, council, any questions that you may have at this time before we open up the public hearing?
Well, at the moment, I mean, this is stuff that we've been discussing for the past 3 months, really, and kind of is what it is. And one of the things nice about it, I think everything is pretty well practical. The question to you is, we're pretty well settled with contracts and that sort of thing, so that this is a real number.
This is a real number. Later on this evening, you will hopefully approve 2 contracts, one with the police sergeants and one with the police patrolmen. All the other numbers are in, as far as we know. There's no other estimates that we could give you at this time, so this is what it is.
All right, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? All right, with that, we'll open it up for public comment. If anyone is in attendance and would like to make comment this evening, I would welcome you to go to the podium, and are happy to hear your thoughts. With that, we'll open up the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Aaron, is there anyone online?
Mayor Bain, I don't have anyone online.
Okay. But open here for just a few moments. Okay, not seeing anyone step forward for public hearing, we'll close public hearing and bring conversation back to council. Council, for our consideration tonight are a number of resolutions, and the first resolution to start us off is 12-12-2201, which is a resolution to set the 2023 tax levy and adopt the 2023 budgets. Before we were to move on to resolutions, any, I guess, other additional discussion or general questions anyone wants to ask? Right. With that, I will entertain a motion if anyone is ready.
Mayor Bain, I make a motion to adopt resolution 12-12-22-01, setting the 2023 tax levy and adopting the 2023 budget.
I'll second.
Excellent. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor of the motion signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose? And our motion is approved. Next tonight is the resolution 12-12-2202, which is to elect the standard allowance available under the Revenue Loss Prevention of the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund established under the American Rescue Plan Act. And Kevin, is this yours as well?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Mayor and council members, so as we've discussed previously with the budgets, the city did receive money related to the American Rescue Plan Act. And at the previous council meeting, there was a memo brought forward to you from our city financial statement auditors, saying that the revenue loss provision is an acceptable use of those funds and declaration to be able to use those funds, and recommended formalizing that through a resolution. So what this is doing is council this formalizing that the city will be electing the revenue loss provision as it's related to this funding and claiming public safety wages related to that revenue loss provision.
Thank you, Kevin. I know we'd had a fairly quick workshop discussion on this previously. Any further questions for Kevin on this? All right, ready for a motion if anyone's ready?
Mayor Bain, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 12-22-02, a resolution to elect the standard allowance available under the revenue loss provision of the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund established under the American Rescue Plan Act.
I'll second.
The motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. And finally, our final resolution tonight is Resolution 12-22-03, which is related to transfers for that fund. Kevin, I'll turn it over to you to explain further.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. So again, this goes back to those budget discussions we've had. So the city received just under $2.3 million in this American Rescue Plan Act funding. Through those budget discussions and how it was presented to the City Council, the use of those funds would greatly impact the citizens of the city if used for water infrastructure projects. The use of the funds towards water infrastructure projects was a major push with the use of this funding, and it will greatly benefit those citizens by not having to take out debt for some of these projects and keeping some of those water rates as proposed lower. So with approving that resolution prior, those funds reside currently in the general fund. So to get those funds into the water fund, if approved, this resolution would authorize the city to move those funds out of the general fund and into the water fund to be restricted to be used for those infrastructure projects.
Thank you, Kevin. Council, any questions on this resolution? Ready for a motion when anyone's ready?
Mayor Bain, I move adoption of resolution number 12-22-03, a resolution approving transfer of American Rescue Plan Act dollars to the water fund.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion is approved. With that, we are at the end of our agenda for tonight's planned Truth and Taxation hearing. And so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Our regular council meeting here will start at about 7 o'clock. All right.
Show you that change on that.
I'll call tonight's city council meeting to order. And Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Munson,
Here.
Councilmember Byström,
Here.
Councilmember Husnick,
Here.
Councilmember Valento. Here. And Mayor Bain.
Here, I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, we have an agenda before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve or any changes.
Mayor Bain, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And our agenda is approved. Next on our agenda is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address council on any topic of their choice. And we don't have anyone in the room for open forum. Karen, anyone online? And no one online either. All right, with that, we'll bring to council consent agenda. And council, tonight for your consideration are consent agenda items 6A through 6G. Happy to entertain a motion or any changes.
Mayor Bain, I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 6A through 6G.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our agenda is approved. Or, I'm sorry, consent agenda is approved. Moving on to regular agenda this evening, and I note that we do have both regular agenda and workshop topics tonight. So moving into regular agenda, we have 7A, Resolution 12-12-2204, which is a donation from Charles Chalberg. And Chief, I'll turn this over to you.
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, good evening. Before you is a resolution accepting a donation in the amount of $200 from Charles Chalberg. I would like to publicly thank Mr. Chalberg for his generous donation to the police department, and staff recommendation is for the City Council to accept this donation with gratitude.
Thank you, Chief. I'll make a motion that council accept Resolution 12-12-2204 with gratitude.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And motion carries. Next item is 7B, Resolution 12-12-2205, and Abby.
Thank you, Mayor Bain, members of the council. Last Saturday, December 3rd, our hometown holiday event was held here. It's an event that we really can't do without our community partners, some of those that are listed in the resolution accepting donations from Forest Lakes Lions Club, Chelsea Erickson, Lone Oak Grill, Bell Bank, Kodiak Coffee, and Custom Cornhole Creation. Those are some actual physical dollar amounts, and some are in-kind donations. And tonight, staff is recommending the council approve Resolution 12-12-2205 with gratitude.
With that, I would motion that council approve Resolution 12-12-2205 with gratitude.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Oppose? And motion's approved. And next, Resolution 12-12-2206, and another donation, Kim.
Good evening, Mayor Bain and City Council members. Before you is a resolution accepting a donation in the amount of $1,190 to the Forest Lake Senior Center for the purpose of buying new card tables. The city would like to publicly thank the Forest Lake Lions Club for their generous donation to the Senior Center. Staff recommendation is for the City Council to accept this donation with gratitude.
Thank you, Kim. Happy to do so. Resolution, so I would motion approval of Resolution 12-12-2206 with gratitude.
I'll second.
A second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion passes. Moving on to 7D. This is fun. We could do this all night, right? 7D, Resolution 12-12-2207. And Kim, I'm going to give this one to you as well.
Okay, thank you. Also before you is a resolution accepting a donation in the amount of $500, although your agenda says $5,000. I'm going to be taking advantage of the vision plan we have here later on after this, so apologize for that. So again, it's in the amount of $500 to the Forest Lake Senior Center. We want to publicly thank the friends and family of Jeanette Hall for their generous donation to the senior center. Jeanette recently moved from Duluth and found a second home at the senior center. She said it saved her when she moved here to Forest Lake. She made friends quickly and left a lasting impression on everyone she met there. She's also a great bridge player. Staff recommendation is for the city council to accept this donation with gratitude.
Happy to do so. Thank you. With that,
Mayor Bain, I just have a question. Do we have
Yeah.
an issue with this reflecting $5,000, the actual resolution?
as long as the resolution gets updated when it's signed, and I'll defer to staff if that is an appropriate resolution for that typo.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I would motion that council approve the amended resolution, 12/12/2207.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and motion carries. Okay, moving on to 7E, a hiring recommendation for our accounts payable position. And Kevin, are you taking this?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So before you is a recommendation for approval of a position for Administrative Assistant 1, Accounts Payable. The city held posted this position and held interviews over the past month. And I also want to note that this is a current position and it's just been vacant for the past many months as we've been trying to fill this position. So as we post this position and worked through our testing process and interview process, the candidate rose to the top. With this, we are recommending the approval to hire Angela Campbell for this position at grade 5, step 1 at $27.72 an hour. And if approved, we would work out the start date with her after the city council meeting.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions that we have for Kevin or staff related to the position recommendation this evening? How long has this position been open?
It's been open, I would say, probably since the end of May. And then we went through the interview process and actually had a candidate in this position for about a week and a half when they accepted a different position. Just with working through that, and the economy took a different offer for more pay was the reason for that. So the city reevaluated what we're looking for and how we want to post this, and the city went through some different hiring processes. We posted on LinkedIn for the first time for this position and got an overwhelming better response rate, which also helped increase, I think, our candidate pool as well. So when we looked at not only this candidate, but the other candidates interviewed, a lot of qualified candidates, and this with taking everything into consideration from myself, Kim and Patrick, and those interviews came to a consensus that this was the best one for the position. So we're hopeful this time around.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? All right, ready for a motion if anyone's ready?
I'll make a motion to approve the hire of Angela Campbell to the position of Administrative Assistant 1, Accounts Payable.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and motion carries. All right, moving on to 7F, our Building Department Online Permitting Process Improvement Proposal. And Dan.
Mayor, members of council, here tonight to talk about the online permitting process improvement proposal. To provide a little bit of context for this, if you recall, back in 2020, the city did switch over to BSNA for our building permit management. The ability to issue permits online is included within BSNA. However, when we deployed back in 2020, we did not deploy the online building permit module due to the fact that we did not have an online payment processor at that time. So we had no way to pay for permits if anything was issued online. We now have that processor in place, thanks to bringing utility billing back in-house. We now have an online payment processor. So as a result of that, we started looking at what do we need to do to bring building permits online and be able to issue permits through our website. As part of that review, Staff discovered we have some significant structural issues with our current data that is within our building permit module, as well as our approval process. It's a little bit convoluted at this point. A lot of those are legacy system issues that came over with the old system into the new system. BSNA just sort of transferred over the data schema from Springbrook into our new system. So a lot of that is legacy issue related. I should also note that even though that there's data issues there, it does work internally for processing, that we have workarounds, we know how to use that existing data set. However, it is preventing us from going online. And at this point, based on our current system, we cannot go online unless we do make some significant changes to our existing building permitting system. Basically what we're looking at is, in essence, a full overhaul of our current data set, our data setup, as well as the processes within the building department. Two main goals for this is to increase efficiency within the building department, as well as the online issuance of permits. I also want to note that not all permit types will be available online. If we have a heavily reviewed permit, for instance, those will follow a different track. They're not going to be what I would call a transactional permit, like a siding permit, where there's almost little to no review. They're almost, transactionally over-the-counter permits that are able to be issued. Those would be online, but the heavily reviewed ones would follow a different track. So to assist with this process, we did receive a proposal to help both clean up the data and the processes. Highlights or key deliverables in the proposal is a full review analysis of our current database and internal permit issuance processes. Basically, take a look at our current system, map the current system, and map the current data that's there. Once that is completed, the consultant will move into the redesign. That redesign will focus on redesigning the current database and processes to allow for online permitting, as well as efficient operations of the department. We also draft standard operating procedures for the system, so existing staff and any new staff will be able to utilize the system following these standard operating procedures. The system will also go through extensive testing, both internally with internal staff, as well as some key external stakeholders. Some identified contractors or heavy users of the system will kind of get put into a beta test to make sure that the system is functioning as designed. Once it goes through the testing, a communication plan for the launch of the system will be developed and implemented as well. And then finally, this proposal does include a guarantee that the online permitting system will be functional. I also didn't want to go through this whole process and at the end of the day kind of realize, oh, we can't get this thing online. I did meet with the consultant, showed him the data set, kind of showed him the back end of the system, and he said, yeah, absolutely, he'll be able to get this thing through the functioning online if we go ahead and approve the proposal. A couple of the benefits of being able to offer permits online, and I want to say I did confirm this with an actual city using the software, so I did not just take salesman lingo and make sure that, sometimes salesmen like to overpromise and underdeliver. I actually reached out to an end user and I said, how is the system functioning? They're currently using the software and issuing permits online. They said the system for them, they're extremely happy with the way it works. A couple of the highlights, they say that if you're a contractor that works within that city, all of the permits that you apply for show up under a contractor portal. So you have access to the system through a contractor portal. So if you apply for, say, 10 roofing permits, you can see the status and where those are under the contractor portal. It is a fully online application. So when the applications come in, they come in through on the staff side through a web portal. Staff does review those, so they don't just get automatically kicked out. Staff comes in, there's pending approvals. They'll review them to make sure, yes, the information is complete. Once that's done, they move into the payment side of it, and the applicant has noticed that your permit is approved pending payment. Once the payment is issued and credited, the permit is issued. So residents or contractors can get a lot of permits without ever having to come into City Hall. The full thing happens through the web portal and through our payment processor. Also, it allows for increased email communications with contractors. So I believe, and I still have to confirm this with this particular city, but the contractors do get notified at various steps. So when they make the application, they get a confirmation email saying that we've received your application. If the status change, I believe you can set the system up to notify the applicant of status changes. So if it goes from pending to approved, they're notified of that, again, electronically. So it cuts down on those calls in the City Hall saying, where's the status of my permit? Where is it? They can go into their contractor portal and find out exactly where that is. And additionally, if they work in other cities that currently use BSNA, they can link their profiles. So if they're working in Forest Lake, which is BSNA city, and say New Brighton, which is also a BSNA city, they can see the status of all their permits under one pane of glass. So from a contractor standpoint, there's a lot of efficiencies that are there. Those also still transfer over to residents as well. But from a contractor, they're going to see a lot of benefit by making or implementing an online building permits. Internally, this will eliminate a lot of data entry that staff is currently doing. So that data entry will take place at the actual applicant stage, which will allow for the system to scale when we have our next storm come through town and we get this big rush of permits that tend to follow. We get a lot of roofing and siding permits after a hailstorm comes through. So instead of having to staff up, run overtime to get those permits into the system, the actual contractor or end user will put those permits in themselves. So it'll save on a lot of data entry, and it'll also save on data entry errors as well, since you're not putting that information in twice. Funding for this proposal will come from fund balance, so it will not impact the 2023 budget. Staff is recommending approval of the proposal with Kornowski Consultants for the building department online permitting process improvement, subject to minor modifications by the city attorney. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have regarding this proposal.
Thank you, Dan. Council, happy to open it up to any questions, discussion.
I just have a comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
No,
Did
go
I-
right ahead.
Oh, okay. I can see hopefully some improvements, especially with communication. I know there's been some issues with not knowing where your permit status is. And so I hope this is a big improvement. It sounds like it's going to be.
And I did confirm that with the other city. New Brighton is actually the one that I contacted. I contacted their permit tech, and they did say, if you put an email address that's in the system, you do get notified. So there's definitely increased.
Even notifying, okay, we have received your application. That should be done the day of, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that should go in once it's received and reviewed, and they should notify that we have the permit.
Okay, so what I'm understanding here then too is that as far as building permits are concerned, if you need a plan review, then this isn't going to be part of that as of yet, right?
I'd have to go in to see how those more additionally reviewed permits. I focus more on the transactional permits through my initial conversation with the permit tech. She did say like heavily reviewed permits. What you'll see when most cities have deployed this, they'll kind of give you the list of here's the permits that we can fully issue online. If you have other questions, call the city's building department, and they kind of give you the process for those reviewed permits. I don't know of, say, for a full house, for example, which has a lot of review steps in it. I'm assuming that's going to follow probably a blended at this point until BSNA does make some improvements. And they're constantly evolving their software, so I'm assuming at some point in the future that will probably be a part of it. But for right now, I focus primarily on the transactional permits.
Okay. That's the only questions I had. Thank you.
So Dan, what type, what do you anticipate in terms of time savings for, what is a typical process? What does the typical process look like now? And what do you anticipate it will look like?
So I can give an example. And again, I don't do this data. This is just some conversational that I've had with the building department in terms of like an application coming in. So if we do a fillable PDF, right now our applications are fillable PDFs. They get filled out, they get emailed into a permit tech. Permit tech takes the fillable PDF information, opens up a new permit, transfers all that data in by hand. So whatever time it takes for them to open that up into that system. They then can process an invoice, call the applicant up, ask them for payment, and then once the payment is applied, either over the phone or the applicant comes into City Hall, we then print the permit, they come in to pick up the permit. From when the system goes live, what they're going to see is basically the applicant puts that information in, it comes into a pending window, so the staff opens up the BSNA and says you've had 3 pending applications. They can go through and say, yes, this is 100% correct, this is good to go, this permit can be issued. They click issue the permit, the system automatically then issues the permit, notifies the applicant that their permit's ready to be issued, pending payment. Once they go to Invoice Cloud, make that payment, the permit gets emailed to them. So they don't, from an end user standpoint, they don't have to come in. But where this really is going to come into its own is when you have those big permit upswings after storm events. Because right now, take that data point from taking a permit application and having to hand translate or hand type all those in versus clicking the approve button. So just from a keystroke standpoint, you're not having to take a huge stack of permits, which always follows a storm. Those will all be done, they'll come in pre-filled out. So that's where a lot of time saving ends. But I can't necessarily quantify the exact time saving, because I've never sat down and actually timed out what a permit application takes to input.
But there is a review step in there, correct?
Correct. You want to review it just to make sure that if it's a contractor, they want to make sure that the contractor there is currently licensed.
Okay.
So they want to make sure that if you're using a licensed contractor, they have an active license. And that's typically, with some of these systems, you don't want to bypass that. You still want a review step just to make sure that they filled it out, filled it out correctly prior to having it issued. Otherwise, people may get a permit that, with incorrect information on the application. But yes, that review step does still remain as part of this.
And we don't anticipate any hangups in that review process at all, particularly if we have a lot of permits coming through.
Not that I would anticipate. I mean, I believe this thing should have no problem scaling up to the number that we'd have after a storm event, because, there's always a stack of paper that comes in after a storm event.
Other questions?
No question, just a comment that it just seems like a no-brainer to me in terms of efficiency.
And again, the structure is there. The software can do it. We just have to basically reconfigure how we're currently classifying permits so it's more logical and more user-friendly on the, if we went live right now, you wouldn't really know what type of permit you would need because it's not intuitive. We're trying to reclassify our data to make it more intuitive to the end user. And this consulting firm understands that, and they understand this from an end user perspective, that they want the end user to have a good experience with the software and we can get permits issued.
End user experience was maybe my question / comment. The proposal talks about kind of city responsibility around testing, and I guess when it comes to planning staff time to support the project, and when it comes time specifically for testing, what is the plan on kind of supporting that? On how there's certainly the work of the consultant, but then ultimately there's work that has to be done on the staff part. So what does that team look like, and that we're internally resourced?
Yeah, I think from like the testing standpoint, is making sure that, the internal processes are remapped according that they make, that we get them through the most efficient way. Because I think sometimes you can look at something from a consultant's eye and assume that it's the most efficient, but until staff actually gets there. So he wants to make sure that there's staff buy-in, that the processes that he's proposing match up with what staff can do. And from the testing standpoint, it's just making sure that the permit goes through the system the way it's supposed to go through the system. So sort of sandboxing it. There's going to be some staff time that's required for that, which is why the rollout is anticipated for November. So we're sort of entering that slow period so we can kind of do some of those final testing. We're not doing those in, August or July when we're sort of at peak issuance.
That was also part of my question, is when will that final testing take place? And
yeah,
November.
We kind of put November out there, but also that can be it's a little bit of a spongy number, just kind of depending upon where everything kind of sequences out, in terms of how complex this actually is on the back end. But the consultant, like I said, has seen our current data and some of our processes and has said, yeah, he can get this cleaned up and functional for us.
I would just encourage us to be very active in that testing process. It's one thing for somebody external to be able to test, but it's something different when it's actually users testing and using it the way that they will plan to use it. And that's ultimately sometimes different than maybe how somebody from the third party has set it up.
That was one of the things when I talked to him about this. He has gone through process improvements before, and he's very cognizant of the fact that there needs to be staff involvement and staff buy-in. That he's not going to try to force something down that, at least has not gone through that vetting process to make sure it does work.
Any other questions? All right, and action tonight, requested action is to accept or to approve the proposal as presented. Any other questions, or anyone ready for a
Just a
motion?
point, since it's a fund balance issue, or using fund balance, in any motion, if you will include that as well.
For fund balance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just one more comment, also with changes as recommended by city attorney. There's a few small changes to the proposal.
And it looks like it's a not to exceed cost of $46,050,
That's correct.
correct?
Yep.
Mayor Bain, I move approval of the building capital repair and replacement matrix proposal. Nope, sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
Not yet.
Mayor Bain, I move approval of the building department online permitting process improvement proposal utilizing fund balance dollars and not to exceed a total cost of $46,050.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And a motion carries. All right, moving on to 7G, the building capital repair replacement matrix proposal. And Dan, I think this is also yours?
Mayor, members of council, here tonight to talk about the capital repair and replacement matrix. As you all are aware, as part of capital planning process, having a current inventory matrix of building assets and their replacement schedule is critical to that plan success. A matrix or a model will allow us to budget for future repairs, replacements for city-owned buildings. We currently don't have this model in place. So we're really on a reactive, not a proactive footing when it comes to repair and upkeep of city buildings. An example of that is the senior center last summer had an air conditioning unit go down, so we had to go back and replace those units. What we're trying to do is get ahead of that reactive maintenance and look at it from a more of a proactive standpoint. What's being proposed tonight is taking a look at that for 3 separate buildings, the city center, this building, the senior center, as well as the south building. What's included is a system review and replacement schedule of those buildings' major systems. That includes roofing, windows, mechanical system, anything that's a major expense along with that in that building. What will happen is that the consultant will come in, look at the current assets that are there, inventory those assets, what's the current state, what's their current age, and then take a look at what the replacement guidelines and costs are for those individual components. All of that will then be rolled up into a capital planning matrix, which will allow us as a city to better prepare for those system replacements. This will be a living document, so it's not one of those things where we get it done in 2022 and it just kind of sits on the shelf. This will be continually updated. And just like our equipment capital replacement plan, the years for when they actually get replaced are going to be fluid. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at, for example, say the boilers in this building have replacement schedule of 2035. We can look at those and say 2033. Upon inspection, they're still in really good shape. The contractor says you get another 5 years. We can slot those down for further on in the replacement schedule. Another big benefit of this, these are going to be, the replacement of these is going to be set up against industry standards. So it's not just going to be a best guess. We're going to take a look at what's the average lifespan of this system, what's the average lifespan of a roofing system that we have here in this building, and then take a look at building that matrix off of that. Where this will also really come into its own is it's going to assist with that repair versus replace, conversation that always comes up. If you have a piece of equipment that goes down, you can take a look at where is it in the replacement schedule? Is it worth fixing it to get X amount more years out of it? Or should we just advance that replacement earlier on? So we're going to have a much better understanding of that repair versus replace conversation as well. Again, funding for this contract would come from the existing fund balance and will not impact the 2023 budget. Staff is recommending approval of the proposal for the capital repair and replacement matrix, subject to minor modifications by the city attorney. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Just to note, this is just another piece of the 10-year plan that we will integrate into that plan.
Dan, just to confirm, this is all city buildings, right? So it's an inventory of all properties.
It's the city center, senior center, and south building is what we're focused on.
Not the water plant.
Not the water plant.
That's separate.
Is the water plant already included as part of, I know Dave's not here tonight, but
Dave has a pretty good handle on what the water plants need and
Okay.
what they do. And any replacement. We've done a lot of work at all those plants recently, so he's got a better handle on that, as well as the lift stations that also need to be repaired, so.
south building, senior center in this building.
Correct.
Yeah, plus those are enterprise funds, and those are in the enterprise funds, and that's where they'll be reflected on the plans.
And just out of curiosity, what is it about the nature of this work that requires an external perspective? Like what's the skill or
I think the biggest thing is expertise to look at these sophisticated boilers, particularly this building, the way it's heated and the lighting, everything about this building is pretty new and pretty higher tech than most buildings that just a staff member could go in and say. So we need the expertise on some of this.
So do these individuals have some sort of kind of structural knowledge too? I mean, what are they looking at? Heating system, lights, the structure itself?
They have knowledge and background in the systems that are in buildings, the roofing, the windows, the lighting, probably even down to the furniture if you want to get that far. I mean, it's pretty jack of all trades, but he has done this before and for other places. So he has experience on doing all of that. And obviously what he does if he runs in, for example, he runs into a boiler he's never seen and it runs differently, he will then go to the manufacturer and talk to them about that particular boiler and how it works and its lifespan and how to judge it all.
So it isn't the physical structure itself? So the integrity of the building?
It's as much as we can get him to do.
Okay, all right.
And he has developed these exact matrices for campuses across the metro and, multi-building campuses, and we'll actually come through on some of those ones. We'll actually weight, what's more important. I mean, obviously heating, cooling, if that needs a replacement versus, is it the example he uses it, paint in a back room probably doesn't rank quite as high as upfront paint. So he does score those or sort of weight those replacements as well, for some systems that are included.
I like the idea of planning ahead. I always have.
Yeah, and this one,
That makes no sense to push this stuff off and
this one's been talked about as a need practically since the building has been built, and that's been a while. So yeah, time to get it done. I would agree. What my scrolling is just failing me at the moment. What is the cost of the proposal?
11,580.
yeah.
11,580.
Page 61.
Any other questions? Happy to entertain a motion if anyone's ready.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we accept the building capital repair and replacement matrix proposal as presented by Dan not to exceed the cost of $11,580, which would be drawn from the existing capital fund or the existing fund balance. So that would have been a better way of saying it.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Okay, moving on to ordinance 714, our 2023 fee schedule and summary resolution. And Karen.
Thank you, Mayor Bain. In front of you, you have ordinance number 714, which you reviewed at the November 28th meeting. This is for the fee schedule that comes around at this time every year. This is an ordinance, so it needs to be voted on. You can see the changes that you reviewed are in red. There was a change that was made after all this was reviewed to section B. Basically, if you take a look at section B, it basically was changed out. It's a lot of language that got changed in there. I don't think any of the fees were changed from where you saw the changes back on November 28th. It's just the way it's laid out and the language changed a little bit. And that's it, basically. You saw the changes. This gets posted, this will get posted, if approved, to our website, so it's available for contractors and residents to view there. We also keep copies of it in the lobby for people that come in. So it's readily available to take a look at for anybody that wants to see what our fee schedule is and what the fees are associated with all the services that the city provides.
This goes to effect, in effect for 2023 on the 1st of January, or when is it?
Yep, goes into effect, well, January 1st, and then and then it gets published. So what I would do is send it over to the paper, they publish it, it goes into effect January 1st. It says 2022, so that's my error, it's 2023. That would get changed.
Any other questions?
No, just a comment. I'm a little concerned about the building rental fees for residents increasing. I fought this one pretty hard last year, and I would just encourage future councils to keep an eye on that. Our residents already pay taxes, city, and I would like to see us hold those costs as much as possible.
As far as I know, it was at $30 prior to that. And then you wanted to see structured residents and non-residents. So we structured it that way. And as far as I know, I tried to go back and look historically, when was the last change for any of those fees and an increase, and I couldn't find it. So I don't know when those fees were changed, the last time that those fees were changed. I'm guessing it was quite some time ago. And that's still at $50 an hour. Just taking a look around at other cities and the facilities that they have available for rent, this still falls pretty cheap under, I don't want to say cheap, we have great facilities, but it's a pretty good deal.
Understood. Any other questions, comments? Yes, I would just point back to the comment that I had made. And it's more in relation to where we are recapturing or charging for the recovery of city, so effort, somebody's had to do something in response to a request, and just making sure that our fees are keeping pace with our increasing costs. And it's always a balance. And you do make a great point on kind of specifically as it relates to room rentals. But I guess I would have us, continue to keep a look at that. And I'd rather us have some small incremental changes than to not do anything for 10 years and then having to do some large adjustment. So let's just make sure we're keeping pace and that we're kind of continuing to keep the goal of the fee schedule, which is to, where we can, offset specific incremental efforts on the part of staff to fees for those that are charging that. But nothing certainly for this year. I think it's just something to watch for future years. Easy to pass it, especially when we have a fee schedule that's this lengthy. It's easy to just get into the mode of same as last year, and pretty soon it's been 5 or 8 years before we've done a change. Any other comments, questions? So for consideration is ordinance 714, and I'm happy to entertain a motion. If anyone's ready?
Mayor Bain, I move approval of ordinance number 714 and ordinance amending ordinance 706 and 708 as codified in Title 3, Chapter 35 of the City Code and the city's fee schedule, and establishing fees and charges for licenses, permits, services, and other charges within the city of Forest Lake, Minnesota.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And our motion carries. We'll move on to ordinance 715, which is an amendment to Title IX. And Karen, I'll let you give the full list. Actually, is this Karen that's walking through?
Goes to Abby.
So I can take that. Thank
Perfect.
you,
Thanks,
Mayor Bain.
Abby.
At your last meeting, introduced you to a couple different fees and charges the city was currently applying. In a review of our fee schedule, we wanted to make sure that those fees were codified into the city code and made sure that they were lawfully applied. So the seal coat fees were introduced to you. Just as a reminder, the city collects these at the time of development for roadways very specific to that development. So this might be a site improvement area or a new residential construction. We hold that seal coat in an account, and after the road is completely finished and there's been a little wear on it, we have the money then to go back and seal coat the road. That just extends the longevity of the road in the long time. Those fees are used specifically for that area, that road. It's not something that we apply into a large account that gets applied throughout the community elsewhere. So if the council is favorable to moving forward with the ordinance, staff recommends the council move to adopt ordinance number 715, an ordinance amending Title 9, Chapter 98, Section 98.33 regarding seal coat fee.
Thank you, Abby. I'll note that this, well, the previous ordinance as well as this ordinance and the one we will talk about next have all been workshopped, and we're subject to a fair amount of discussion as part of those workshops as well. Anyone have any new comments or thoughts since we've last talked about this topic regarding the seal coat fee?
What have we done in the past? Have we done nothing with the seal coating or?
No, we have done it. So we've applied it to developments. It's just not in the zoning code or in the city code. So what this does is it codifies the regulations so that when we apply it, we're doing it, you know, in accordance with our adopted laws.
Any other questions? Thoughts?
Mayor Bain, I move to adopt ordinance number 715, an ordinance amending Title 9, Chapter 98, Section 98.33 regarding seal coat fee.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. Brings us next to ordinance 716 regarding stormwater connection fee. And Abby, is this you as well?
It is, again, introduced at your last meeting. I do want to note, just for the record, at your last meeting, this was referenced as a stormwater connection fee, as noted on your agenda as well. However, what we're talking about actually is a stormwater trunk area charge, or a STAC. It's STAC. This is something, again, that the city has been applying. However, it's not codified. The STAC really is, so it's a non-residential development or site improvement agreement, or else when a new residence is being built, we apply this fee, and it helps us put some money into our stormwater fund, really helps maintain this system as a whole. That's all the ponds that we have to maintain and cleaning of things and pipes and all of that jazz. Yes, that is a technical term, all that jazz in the stormwater world, I guess. Again, if the council is favorable, staff would recommend you move to adopt ordinance 716, an ordinance amending Title 5, Chapter 52, Section 52.82 regarding stormwater trunk area charge.
Just to confirm, we have been charging.
We have been charging this,
And
yes.
we're not changing anything
We are not
in practice of what applies?
Nope, we are
It's
not
just-
changing the application at all of that fee.
Council, any questions that you have? I would just say, Abby, I know that this has been a focus of work that you've been focusing on as you've kind of gotten into your role, and just making sure that we've got I's dotted and T's crossed. So thank you. And if it's something we're doing, it needs to be codified, and it just provides the clarity that's needed. So thank you for the diligence and getting us kind of making sure everything's in sync.
Yep, well, I had help. We work on things as a team, right?
Any questions? All right, happy to entertain a motion if anyone is ready.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 716, an ordinance enacting Title 5, Chapter 52, Section 52.87 regarding stormwater trunk area charge.
I'll second.
We have a motion. Oh, go ahead.
52.82.
That's what it says on the agenda, but on the ordinance, it says 52.87 on the title and in it.
That might be an area if I can just look it up really quick.
Yeah, chapter 52, section 5282.
It should be 5282. But that was my error in the resolution, in the ordinance.
Okay, I'll amend my motion. So I'll restate it. I'll approve ordinance number 716, an ordinance enacting Title 5, Chapter 52, Section 52.82 regarding stormwater trunk area charge.
And I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? And motion carries. And next is consideration ordinance 717, a moratorium on THC and CBD. And Patrick?
Sure. Mayor and members of City Council, before the legislature last adjourned, they decided to, either by mistake or by intention, to legalize certain THC products, CBD products. They did so without giving cities any guidance, any regulations, anything at all. Many cities have reacted to this by wanting to regulate and license and restrict all of the sales of these products. We have experienced so far that we have a number of different places that already sell this particular these particular items. When you get to regulations and things, if you look at alcohol or tobacco sales, they have restrictions on how far it can be from a school or a playground or things. We have none of that. We are not judging whether we should or shouldn't have this in the community. We just want to be able to understand better what we need to do. With the recent election and comments in the media regarding the legalization of recreational marijuana, we expect that that may be coming forward fairly quickly in the legislature. If that comes forward in the legislature, I assume, or I hope, that it's a lot more defined and regulated and gives us some structure on what our local authority will be, or how we can regulate it if we need to regulate it. The state may preempt it, we don't know that. Since that may be coming, that will take care of some of the issues that we're having or think there may be with this type of product. So instead of trying to regulate it or to restrict it, recommending that we put a moratorium on it until this, for a year, or until the state decides where they're going to take it. This would not affect current owners or operators or sellers, manufacturers, whatever the case may be, of these products, but it would prevent any new members, new retail establishments or production establishments from gaining access to the market. Again, not trying to judge whether we should or should not allow this at this point, but we want to make sure that we know where it is, and if it's close to schools, if it's close to playgrounds, things like that. So we'd like to see what the state's going to do in the next year, and hopefully give us guidance on not only this, but if they legalize the recreational marijuana. So questions, please.
Sure sounds like that's going to happen. The vibrations out there anyways. But I agree that with staff in this particular case, because there has to be something written down, some kind of guidance there, and we don't have any of that. So I think I was wanting to mention that before, and it's going to be a tough situation without it.
Yeah, we've had discussions whether we should regulate it, whether we should license it. Our initial feeling was we really shouldn't license it. We don't know how many there are going to be. However, distancing regulations like we do with alcohol and tobacco seem appropriate. That would probably be one of the regulations if we don't get to licensing, which would make sense. But right now, we weren't thinking of licensing it yet. So
I didn't realize this was where my question was, but I think this is maybe where I'm landing of when we have a moratorium, it's because we know that we have authority to do something and we have decided to stop doing something. Do we know that we have the authority to regulate these products?
Yeah, it's my understanding that other communities have passed ordinance that regulate these products because there is very little, if any, guidance from the state. There has been regulation in other communities. There have been moratoriums in other communities. The moratorium gives us a chance to sit back and not overreact by trying to regulate or try to license, but to, in this case, see if we need to, but also see what the action out of St. Paul is going to be. So there has, as far as I know, and Amanda can comment if she wishes, we do have the authority to regulate this in whatever manner, some manner that we feel is appropriate.
I'd welcome more color. I think maybe I'm stuck on, we have specific guidance in other areas where we are allowed to or given the authority to do certain things. And this one just seems a little, it always felt a little square peg round hole, and it's part of like, we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to create structure, but what's complicated about this is there's just nothing, there's no framework, there's no structure. This, the state hasn't provided that. And I appreciate it's just a moratorium so we can figure it out. But I'm kind of just stuck on where's our authority to even do a moratorium or to, and that's kind of, so I could use just foundation. And if we need to come back to this conversation, we can do that. I'm just trying to sort things out.
Your Honor, Counsel, yes, we do have the authority to implement a moratorium if we want to in this situation. We would also have authority to regulate it from a zoning perspective, so we could zone it. It's a use. And so we would zone it wherever we would want it to be, whatever zoning districts, and we could also put restrictions in terms of, like 1,000 feet from a school or parks or whatever other types of restrictions we would want. And as Patrick mentioned, we could also do a licensing scheme where you would need to have a license. I can tell you neighboring communities have done all of those, and some have done nothing. A lot of cities at this point are putting in moratoriums, if nothing else, largely so they don't have 15 shops popping up that then become legal non-conforming uses. So if you try to do something later, you're sort of stuck with that particular shop or shops until they go away. The moratorium, what it does is it's saying you have the right to study this use, take a look at it, figure out where you want it, if you want it anywhere. Probably 4 or 5 months ago, we did something similar with wetland banking. We weren't really sure if we wanted it in the city, and we certainly didn't know where, if we would want it. This is the exact same thing. We have the exact same authority because we are not preempted by state statute right now. There is a belief that here in this next this next legislative cycle, that there will be some sort of more robust framework, something that probably looks like how the state licenses alcohol or tobacco, where it's sort of a partnership with cities, but it's sort of anybody's guess in terms of what they ultimately come up with. In the interim, the advice from the League of Minnesota Cities has been definitely to do something unless you aren't worried about the proliferation of CBD shops.
One thing about the moratorium, that's the key, for as I'm concerned, is at least we have some time to try to implement something that's fair for everybody. And a year, I think, is an appropriate amount.
My struggle with a moratorium is that usually when there's a moratorium, we're identifying something that's within the city's control, that here's the next action that we're going to direct staff to do. And in this case, the moratorium is that hopefully somebody else figures it out or provides more. And I'm not that staff is going to take, with all respect to staff's capabilities, I know that with a moratorium, I trust that you would do some additional work, but there just isn't that framework to provide a solid answer. And so it's kind of a moratorium while we wait for more guidance from the state. And that's just,
Well, either that or there may be no more guidance from the state, depending on what happens in St. Paul. So we do have control over what we can do here. It's just, let's take a pause. Let's see what we can do. We can start to discuss it internally. If nothing happens, if there's no change or no other direction, we can then decide what's in the best interest of Forest Lake as far as where these shops should be, or what, it also includes manufacturing and things like that. So we can't guarantee there'll be any more direction. So we are in control because there is no restriction on us to not implement something, so.
Mayor Bain, I would say if we don't do something like a moratorium, we could have a lot of these popping up all over, whether that's distribution, the making of, and then if something passes, which there was a story about this today, about a lot of cities doing this, because then you're stuck.
Right.
And then we already know we've had issues with things in this city with other substances.
I'm kind of confused on why, I understand why CBD is attached to it, because I assume there's nothing in our ordinance regarding and regulating CBD, even though CBD has been legal for a few years now. So that's one thing that I guess caught my eye.
Your Honor, Counsel, if I can address that. So what was approved at the state level was CBD, was hemp CBD that was creating the intoxicating cannabinoids. It's not, so it's not derived from the marijuana plant, it's derived from the hemp plant. And so that's a difference between, that's why the CBD is in this ordinance, because it's directly tied to what was legalized at the state level. So we're using the same words, but the only thing that this is regulating is intoxicating products. So if you're talking about the CBD lotions or oils or whatever, that kind of thing, that's not an intoxicating. So I believe it's like less than 0.3% THC or whatever the threshold is, again, in the state statute. That is not impacted by this moratorium, and we have not done anything to try to in any way impact non-intoxicating CBD products.
We have enough of an issue in this community with youth substance use. I just really want to take a step back, push pause, and say, what can we do to ensure the well-being of our young people in this community more? I don't think it ever hurts to just take a step back, kind of analyze the situation, proceed forward cautiously. Not saying this shouldn't happen, but I just think we have to be careful how it happens, if it happens. Have we checked the Public Health Law Center? Do they have any model policies in place or model ordinances?
Your Honor, Counsel, no,
No.
they don't. No, we have checked. No, they don't. So actually, who's supposed to be regulating this is Board of Pharmacy, but they don't want it. So there's sort of some internal struggle at the Capitol level in terms of who is the overseeing body for this. This truly was, the League of Minnesota Cities had no idea this was being approved. And it was kind of done in the 11th and a half hour, and nobody from the city's perspective knew it was in the bill. There were certainly a lot of people who knew, but the League of Minnesota Cities was not privy to any of it, or to point out, hang on, we need a few more things. So the reality is the state is going to have to do something this cycle. I don't know if it's cleaning up the statute. The statute itself is actually incredibly internally inconsistent. So even the types of THC products that it's saying are legal under this sort of new 3-sentence thing that was thrown in, that's in direct conflict with a subdivision literally 2 paragraphs away that says that that's not legal. So we need tremendous cleanup at the state level, which is partly why at a staff level we've talked about the importance of putting this moratorium in place, because nobody is in charge right now.
And this is really getting at high-level THC, the gummies, the drinks, things like that, correct?
And I had a conversation today with Metro Cities Organization, and in their legislative policy documents and the league's legislative policy documents for 2023 both address this situation and request the legislature for clarity on this particular subject, so.
Is there, yeah, I was gonna say, is there even a regulation on age limits and that kind of thing? Have
There's
we-
no regulation. on
There's,
anything.
that was,
Oh,
here's my, I guess just foundationally, my struggle on this is, to me, this is a health and human service type question and a larger health and human service policy that we just don't do that as a city, except for in our zoning laws. And so to take all of these health and human service questions and to try to create some sort of regulatory framework within zoning, just, to me, just fundamentally feels square peg, round hole. But the alternative, as you just point out, and as we've talked about, is nothing, and that also doesn't feel right. I'm just not sure that, that cities are the best place for this to be sorted out. But again, in absence of other structure, I guess this might be the threshold of it's better than nothing. And that might just be what I have to wrap my head around, is it's better than nothing. Because there's no regulation for, so today, somebody could sell to a minor. There's no.
That's, I mean.
And
yeah.
does that change if we, though, put that into our zoning? Like that, there's the part that I.
No, the only thing we're doing is not allowing locations.
So
It
it's,
doesn't,
the only thing is it gonna be a location?
and the important, go ahead.
Your Honor, Counsel, the other place would be if we did licensing. So that's where we could get at an age restriction. So if we license the people who can sell it and then we restrict them to, you have to sell to 18 or 21. I believe Stillwater is regulating 21 plus, and I think certain other places are at 18. But
Each city's gonna figure out their own, whether they're 18 or 21.
well, so, and this is where it becomes, it's going to look a lot, in my opinion, it's going to look a lot like your tobacco and your alcohol, so they're going to have a license at the state level, that they'll put an age limit, and then they'll have the checks, the compliance checks that, the cities do annually. I think that's ultimately, the reality is the framework does exist. It just needs to be, moved into the THC as the drug that we are licensing versus alcohol or tobacco. So we do have that framework. We can certainly move that over here if we need to. The hope is that the state does it, so we don't have to do it. But if 4 months from now, 5 months from now, 7 months from now, it appears as though it is not happening, then we're going to need to probably look seriously at licensing and potentially some zoning regulations. Licensing potentially first, and then because you can do some limiting in your number of licenses and then, some things like that.
And
this just buys us that time.
I was just gonna say, if there isn't a moratorium in place and we now have, say, there's 30 locations, are we able to ever license them? Where I guess maybe getting confused between what happens on the license versus what happens in zoning law. Because again, zoning law is our tool, but it just feels like just not the right place for regulation.
So, Your Honor, Counsel, yes, you can license them if they are existing, but you would have to give them a license. You have to give them the opportunity to get the license. You can't push them out of, business by preventing them from getting a license. Now, I say that, but there are a few city attorneys out there who are saying that they can essentially shut down these shops by, only putting out 4 licenses, even though they have 10 shops. The first 4 to apply get it. The last 6 are out in the cold. So sad, so sorry. I don't think that the law is very strong on that. I think that you do need to give them 10 licenses, but you wouldn't necessarily, depending upon, how they do on compliance checks and the like, have to always, allow 10. And as they fall off, you can say in the ordinance that we'll have 10, but it will sunset with each person who leaves. Now we're down to 9 and no, so that's how you would shrink that number. But that's also why we feel like we don't want 30 that we're quickly, we're trying to figure out what to do with.
And the big 10 of them might be across the street from the school.
Where's that?
Mayor Bain, if I might just add for the council too, if the city did impose a buffer distance in the zoning code, let's just say during this next year, we worked through different things and we found that we did not want them in certain areas and imposed a buffer area. Those that are actually within those buffer areas have a legal non-conforming right and would be able to stay there in perpetuity. And so even though there may be tools in the licensing that can help eliminate them, the zoning code is a lot more restrictive that way.
And does that legal non-conforming transfer, it goes with the property, not the business?
It is
so
a vested
that
land.
property can forever be.
Correct.
Yeah.
It does give us an opportunity to find out exactly what the state's going to do. That's my only issue on this. I think that the whole thing is inevitable. It's going to happen. I really do. And, but I think that we just need some breathing room and some idea that, first of all, every regulation you come up with, how do you police it? That's and so if the state came up with something that we thought was relevant, we could adopt the state regulations and go from there. Otherwise, if they don't, or if we don't feel that their regulations are compatible with our city, then we could come up with something. And then so that was the only reason I was really in favor of this this moratorium. And it seems to me that, we were asking for a moratorium for a year here, but it seems to me that if something came along and quicker than that we could do something at the council level to fix that. And
Well, I think the fact that the League of Minnesota Cities is chasing their tail and the Board of Pharmacy doesn't want it speaks volumes. Support a moratorium.
Right. Yes, although, again, it goes back to it's a moratorium because of factors we can't control, right? So, I'm just not comfortable. I'm not comfortable leaving it just up to the state to figure out. Like, I feel like I might be able to support a moratorium tonight, but I also feel like we should move on. What does a licensing process look like? And maybe give this legislative session to see if one comes forward. But if one doesn't start coming forward, and if we have an option to do it through another, to do it ourselves, it'd be nice if there was a model, legislation or a model licensing from the league or somebody. But if we're going to do something, I want us to do it well and to kind of own it. Like it's our moratorium. I think we need to actively manage that. And just recognize that if it's not going to get sorted out quickly or with clarity, then we either need to lift the moratorium and let the market figure it out, or we need to take action. I think we're just kind of in this messy middle that has me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think you're absolutely correct. If I anticipate that if we don't see any action through probably June or July, that internally we'll start working on regulations and licensing. There are plenty of examples out there. League does not have a model ordinance yet, but there are plenty of other cities that have adopted either licensing or regulation or both. So that's easy to find what fits Forest Lake. But if it's not happening by, like I said, June, July, we will have to start working on regulations and workshop it and try to figure out where the council at that time sits on the subject.
Well, and there's a framework with tobacco. I mean, and I think the other piece here is that the legislature is going to very seriously considering legalization. Probably needs to be a part of whatever is developed out by the city. So we don't know what we don't know quite yet, where that's concerned.
Your Honor, a council point, just a clarifying point. Right now, what we are suggesting we put a moratorium on is the hemp manufactured CBD. So if they were to legalize just straight recreational marijuana, we wouldn't have a moratorium against that at that point in time. If we thought that was coming and they didn't have a framework, but they were just sort of opening up everything, then we would come to you with another moratorium that would have just, marijuana recreational marijuana as the moratorium to give us time, again, to put in whatever the framework is that we need. So just a clarification, this is just what's currently legal.
Right, and I'm not suggesting that you're including marijuana in here, but what I'm saying is that, again, this buys us some time to see what's going to happen at the legislature. Because if there's a need to sort of, package something down the road, we have the opportunity to pause on this current piece and consider what else is coming before us, or you.
So this only, don't have the moratorium, so this only covers new businesses, correct? So existing businesses can continue to expand their,
So it does not allow for new or expansion of. So whatever they're doing today would be what they can do. So and this is where it gets a little bit difficult to regulate in terms of, we don't know what types of products there are on their shelves. And so certainly if they had 10 shelves dedicated to these and they went to 20 shelves, there would be no way for the city to kind of determine that. But if you're looking at expanding the building, a measurable expansion where we would be able to relatively easily figure out that they have expanded, but it is new and expansion of.
so the development of these products is happening quickly, right? And so take some of the THC seltzers that are now available. Would this, if those are not currently available in the city, would those prohibit the inclusion of those to be included on, existing liquor license is now going to sell THC seltzers? This would prohibit them from doing that, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor. And right now, bars can sell THC seltzers, but liquor stores are not allowed to under state law. They are prohibited from selling THC seltzers, so you can't buy them at a liquor store. You can only get them at a bar, and there's some regulations around them having to open them and some things.
There is some regulation. Somewhere, there is a regulation. Okay.
I think things will get clearer.
I'm really
it's clear
just,
as mud, but
I'm just really conflicted on this topic, as you can tell from the nature of my questions. I could, and part of me who thinks it's legal, let's have it be legal. But there are also very few things where we also don't have some level of control, and this is also an area where currently we just don't have a level of control. So hence my consternation. But
what makes me feel comfortable about the moratorium is the fact that with this legislative session coming up, and knowing that you guys the staff will be watching it, and knowing that whether they will expand what they already have and clarify, or whether they will completely legalize marijuana, I think staff will come to a consensus and work together and create some good regulation that the city will pass in a manner.
other questions?
Mayor Bain, are you ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Bain, I move to adopt ordinance number 717, an interim ordinance prohibiting the establishment of new uses or the expansion of existing uses related to intoxicating cannabinoids, CBD sales, testing, manufacturing, or distribution for 1 year.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to item, what a great chaser to a conversation on THC is. Let's pass law enforcement contracts. All right, 7L, Patrick.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, before you is the contract with the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 111, which represents, I believe, the patrolman in this case. We present a contract settlement between the two parties for a 3-year contract. going through the end of 2025. This is an extension of the prior contract. You have been briefed on this in closed session and so forth. We had negotiations last month on these, in October actually, for this one, and came to a settlement. Basically, the wage settlement mimics and reflects that of all the other unions that we have, the AFSCME, the MAPE, and the 49ers. It calls for a 2% increase on January 1st and a 1% increase on July 1st for each of the 3 years. It makes adjustments in the health insurance payment split between the city and the employer to also reflect those contracts of the other unions. And it adjusts basically the longevity equation for this group. So those are the 3 highlights of this. I believe it's a fair contract. I believe it also is a contract that will allow us to retain our more senior people and not lose them to other communities, which is happening these days. A lot of cherry picking going on from the smaller to the bigger places. So with this settlement, I think we can prevent some of that. So again, I think it's a fair contract, and I ask that you approve the contract with the patrol unit, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Patrick. Council, any questions that you have on this contract? Topic of a number of council meetings previously, so understand if everyone's had questions answered previously, but anything else tonight?
It's everything that we talked about and pretty much agreed on, and I'm just glad that the thing is settled. I think it's, it's a good settlement, and
Settled in a just challenging environment, so.
it is.
Yeah, I would like to thank the patrol union and representatives for being a very willing partner and respectful partner. The negotiations were done in a very nice, not nice, but very professional manner, and I appreciate their willingness to come to the table in that manner.
Fabulous. Any questions?
A lot of pages.
Yeah.
Mayor Bain, I move approval of the agreement between the City of Forest Lake and Law Enforcement Labor Services, LELS Local 111, for the term January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025.
I'll second.
You have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Just echo Patrick's appreciation for to the patrol union and coming to the table for this and let's coming to an agreement.
And also to city staff.
And to staff. Absolutely. All right, with that, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, and motion carries. Moving on to 7M, our next contract, and Patrick.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, before you tonight, again, Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 326. This union represents the sergeants of the police department. Again, we entered into negotiations with the sergeants union in November. I would like to thank them as well for being professional and willing to speak and talk frankly and come to an agreement. This is also a 3-year contract that goes through the end of 2025. It reflects almost exactly what the patrol unit was granted. So a 2% increase on January 1st and a 1% increase on July 1st for the next 3 years. It adjusts the medical contribution that the patrolmen the sergeants make and what the city makes. And it adjusts the longevity a bit. I have to point out, and I failed to do that, the longevity clauses in both of these contracts have not been adjusted since 1985. So I think it was a good time to make that adjustment and a good way to try to encourage retention of our sergeants and of our patrolmen. So if you have questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions on this particular contract? LELS 326. Hearing none, I would move that council approve the agreement between the city of Forest Lake and LELS Local 326 for the term January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2025.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And just thank you to the union for coming to the table and for the cooperation and getting another 3-year agreement done. It's great. So much appreciated. Also the work on staff and getting us to this point. All right, with that, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. That ends our lengthy action agenda for this evening. We do have a number of topics on our workshop agenda. These will be discussion topics only. Anything that's discussed tonight that requires official action will come back before council for a vote. So with that, let's move into our workshop topics of 8A, the Minnesota Law Enforcement Support Office, Community Notification, and Chief.
Yeah, what I have before you, what I have before you tonight is nothing that requires any action from you, but it is a community notification that the Forest Lake Police Department has and will potentially acquire property through the Minnesota LESO program. It's also known as the Minnesota Law Enforcement Support Office. We have actually been utilizing this program for the past couple of years, and we've been in full compliance with the LESO program. But a presidential executive order signed earlier this year named Advancing Effective, Accountable Policing and Criminal Justice Practices to Enhance Public Trust and Public Safety requires me to formally notify you as our local governing body and the community that our intentions are to acquire property through this program. And I've presented this to you in the last couple of years. It might even be the 3rd year this year, maybe the 3rd year that we have been utilizing this program to acquire property from the state of Minnesota and or federal sources. And those items can be items that they no longer need. So they allow us to use them as law enforcement agencies. And those can be anything from tourniquets, first aid kits, and some other items like flashlights, boots, training uniforms, and things like that. The majority of these items that we acquire are actually through the SWAT team. So it's through a JPA, Joint Powers Agreement, that we have with Washington County Sheriff's Office. And some of those items are a little bit more robust, like listed on this community notification are possibly all-terrain vehicles, which are acquired through Washington County, but we need to notify you and our community that those items might be utilized by our officers who are assigned to the SWAT team, and or if there happens to be an incident up here that they might be utilizing those types of equipment and or vehicles. So the memo and community notification to request control property is also in tonight's city council packet, which will serve as a notification to the community. And my name and contact information is on there, along with our department's Minnesota LESO program coordinators' contact information. If anyone has any questions for us in regards to the program, any equipment that we have acquired. And so this is just a notification to you and to our community. So with that, if there's any questions for me.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Thank you. We can move on to the 2022 year in review. Ryan?
Mayor, City Council, it's that time of year again already, if you hard to believe, but here we are. So each year I'll prepare a high-level year in review, just kind of reflect on where we've been, some of the things that we've accomplished, and all the decisions you guys have been a part of our infrastructure projects and planning, and all the other things that we've touched. And obviously it's not a comprehensive list, but it's a high level, and you just skim quickly through this, and you're like, whoa, I forgot about that. I forgot about this. I mean, these are obviously a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, and a lot of decisions you guys have been a part of that have moved the city forward and put us in a better place. So just kind of like to reflect on that time of year when we have a chance, when things we wish would slow down, but they seem like they're speeding up already. So it's going to be an interesting 2023 year, I think. So outlined some of the stuff that's, some of the money that we've been able to bring back, with working with city staff too. And we want to get better at that in 23 as we got a lot of challenges moving forward on some infrastructure. So the better forward thinking we can be on some of these projects, the better chance we have chasing funding. And then also just want to let you know, we're thankful to be working in the community, and thus we show it through the sponsorships or activities we're involved in. And we're always looking to be involved with more activities when they come possible. So here's your year in review, and that's all I got to say. So
Thank you, Ryan. Always a great agenda topic and great to see what's been accomplished. And we appreciate your leadership and your team's work in getting us to this point. Just catches my interest as I think about 2022 grants obtained, and just, as we're rolling into this legislative session with such a large legislative surplus, it'll be interesting to see what may happen. It's not a bonding year, right? But it might be a bonding year.
Might be because
right?
they just didn't have it last year.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those surplus funds. And I know everyone in this room will be watching that, but something we should all just continue to highlight as we think about, because we've got a long list of infrastructure, and depending on how those dollars are looking to be spent, there might be some opportunities we should take advantage of. So don't mean to steal the thunder from your 2022 review, Ryan, but something that comes to mind.
totally agree.
All right, thank you for that, Ryan. And we can move on to 8C, which is the Parks and Recreation Commission Ordinance Amendment discussion.
Mayor and members of the City Council, before you is a draft of a possible ordinance change regarding the Parks and Recreation Commission. This new ordinance would be a repeal and replace. Staff believes this is a good step in better defining the roles of the committee and staff as well. As you all know, there are a number of vacancies, so I think it's an opportune time to take advantage of that and to redefine and restructure this committee. The new proposed ordinance has, it's Christmas, basically kind of structures into three different ways. It really defines what the membership of the committee is, and the big change here from a 7-member committee, it's not so much the number, but it's who's going to be on the committee. As you all recall, we talked about a field usage committee in the past where we'd have FLA together with the city and with the high school. Well, instead of having a parks committee and a field use committee, it makes more sense to combine those and to have a representative of both the school and FLA on the new Parks and Recreation Board. That way there's no, jumping back and forth, and everybody's at the table. They are interested partners when it comes to parks and to recreation, and being that the high school does a lot of the recreational programming, they're a good partner. We, this year, have had them do the scheduling for us. So again, that's another good partner. And of course, FLA has traditionally provided athletic recreational programs to the city, and would be also a good partner to have at the table. So that's one of the big changes as far as the committee goes. The second one, like I said, it defines what the committee is supposed to do. There's always been some kind of misunderstandings or unsureness what the charge was. Again, with Forest Lake's history of going from a park board that had authority to an advisory board, some of that got mixed up and nobody really figured out where they were supposed to go or what they're. So this, hopefully, the description here defines that better for any new people that will come on the board. So that's what it does. And the third, what it does is it also then defines what the staff role is in this. It defines that the staff is responsible for updating plans and programs and suggestions and things along those events. But it calls out what community development is responsible for, which means the park coordinator that we have, but also now Public Works, what they're responsible for. Before, it was also not real clear who was responsible for what. And we had a park coordinator trying to buy garbage cans or benches for the parks, which that doesn't make any sense, but that's more programming. Now, the development and the maintenance of the park will be in Public Works, of course, with support from community development and the committee, but also the recreation person will be more programming and more things like that. So I think those are good changes. I know you've read through this. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer, or Abby will help me get out of trouble if you get me in trouble. So.
Questions, thoughts, feedback?
I, just one quick thought, and I won't be here when you vote on this, but I just to put my 2 cents in, I really like the idea of adding FLA to this. It just makes so much sense communication-wise, to have them have a seat at the table, yeah.
And I would say this, we've had a different relationship with the school district, but they are also an interested party. So having that seat filled, and it becomes a little bit more of a working commission than just peer advisory. So, other thoughts, feedback points?
It'll be a difficult thing to get it right, I think.
What?
It'll be complicated and difficult to get it right, with the parks. Things kind of fell apart there, and
Yeah, and I think this is, again, a new beginning. We've got buy-in from, I believe, FLA, we've talked to them, buy-in from the school. We have a community development director that is understanding what this needs, and we have a public works department head that knows what they need. And the collaboration in that level has been very good. So I think it's a positive step. I think it's something that actually will succeed this time.
Yeah, I like that it clarifies roles and the scope of work, who's responsible for what internally here at the city, but also what the commission is charged with. I noticed the change in the title and the absence of the word lakes. Is there a rationale behind that?
We want to focus it on the parks and the recreation. The lakes, we have a separate agreement with now, as
Okay.
far as that goes. So we think that works better. The relationship between both lakes and the public works director is good. They worked real hard at coming to an agreement and understanding of what roles and what the expenses are. So I think we just need to leave that part alone.
To that point, we've also taken trails off as well.
And trails are more part of a development when we have new development, but also part of Public Works maintenance. So when Public Works, what happens here with Public Works is they put a 10-year plan for the parks. Once this park study is done, Dave will, on the maintenance side, look at those trails and when they need to be done. But also when we have new housing developments and things, trails are automatically included in that discussion with the developers. So that's where it's covered.
I'm just curious where some of that intersection will occur, because, the lake is one of our greatest recreational amenities that we have in the community. So is there, there's been conversation about fishing piers and,
Correct.
some of those sorts of things. So
Yeah, I believe when it comes to those kind of things that community development, Public Works, and myself will make sure those things get done. And, you look at the 10-year plan, that has a lot of impact on what's supposed to be the downtown park and where the boat launch is. So that will have our attention as well.
I do, I think this ordinance has gone into a fair amount of detail around roles at the staff level that we typically wouldn't cover, I don't think, in an ordinance. But I think it's helpful in this particular circumstance to just outline what's expected to be public works, what's expected to be community development, and then also obviously the role of the commission. And so if having that all together in the same overall document, and if that is the ordinance, I'm happy. I think we're at a point where more definition is better than not as much definition. And so, I would hope that over time we're, not necessarily needing to be at that level of detail in our ordinances, but again, I can appreciate for this point in time why it's necessary, and I think it helps manage the overall change, so I'm happy to support it.
Mayor Bain.
Also, that helps to also tee up the difference between staff role and commission role, which is important.
Mayor Bain and Council, when staff worked on this ordinance, we really thought that this was a transition ordinance. So in looking at the current ordinance, there's still quite a bit of legal reference to obligations that the park board had. And really transitioning away from, we once had a park board and then we've had this past commission to what are we? Because it is a collaborative effort. It isn't its own department, and that makes it pretty unique. I think many of you sitting up on this council have agreed that our parks are a priority, our system is a priority, and in 5-10 years, maybe that's different, and maybe this reevaluation of this ordinance will be necessary at the time. But really for this transition, for staff that's here, staff that could come in, staff in transition, I think it really will help all of us just kind of vet through this next period. As Sam had indicated, it might be a little bumpy, but I think this will help us in the long run.
I guess I just broadly ask, are we missing anything in this? Is there anything that's not covered that should be?
No, I just like that more is covered rather than less. I think it'll help create an objective for everyone, and since it is a board where so much of the staff is intersected within it, it's just gives better direction.
Any other points of feedback? Abby, do you have what you need of us?
Yes, we do. We'll be bringing this back before you in January for formal consideration. And we'll kind of, with the hope that we'd have it adopted by the time we have a new commission seated in hopefully February.
All right. With that, we will move on, leave our workshop discussion topics and move on to staff updates. And we'll start with Karen.
I did want to mention that if you go to the city website, look under services and then look under refuse and recycling, that information has been updated for 2023. I've received several calls, and I think there's, again, confusion about the bill as it changes in January and the rate increases for Republic Services. Excuse me. We do have a contract with them. At the beginning of that contract, the city knew that there would be those rate increases incrementally in January, beginning of January, and then, following the next January. And so just really quick, I wanted to let people know that the base change from last year to this year is 30 cents per month. And then there's changes in if you have an additional cart, change in the recycling fee. But the biggest change is those tipping charges that the city and Republic Services have no control over. So the tipping charges, people will see an increase of about $16 per year on their bill. So it's about $1.33 per month is what they're seeing. That's actually the biggest change on the bill. So I've had people call very concerned that this has grossly increased, and the increases are showing up in an area where the city and Republic Services don't have control over that. That's part of what the fees are for tipping. So people can get more information on that. They can go to recyclingandenergy.org if they want to learn about how the county and what those tipping fees are, if they want to learn about how that happens. And also, they do provide tours of the facility. So they invite you to come and see the facility. You can see what happens with all of that, and it's apparently quite efficient.
Are we in year 4 or 5 of that?
We are, so the contract goes through December 31st, 2024. If you recall, it started mid-year in August of 2019.
So this is the start of year 4.
This is the start of year 4, and then it will go all the way through 2024.
That's
Thank you,
all I
Karen.
have.
Dan?
Mayor, members of council, I attended last week's real estate journal market update. Just overall, the reports back coming from all the different market segments within the metro is that multifamily remains strong in the metro area, so a lot of multifamily starts metro-wide. What they also has said is that due to construction costs and rising interest rates, some pre-approved projects are starting to kind of go into a holding pattern, but they anticipate as construction costs, like some of the material costs start to go down, those projects will go forward. But right now, I would say there's a lot of, probably a little bit of reservation just in terms of launching big projects right now, but certain market segments are still strong across the metro area. Also want to update council that the EDA did update the downtown incentive at their last meeting. I can't remember if that got reported out or not. It's now the Capital Incentive Improvement Program, which is now a forgivable loan program. We expanded that area a lot larger than just the downtown area, so it's now pretty much all commercial areas within the city are eligible. I'm working on a rollout for that plan in 2023. Kind of wanted to let the holidays go through, and then in 2023, we'll do a bigger rollout for that. And speaking of rollouts, our new website is scheduled to go live on January 18th. So they're going to do the cutover, I believe, in the afternoon, and then we'll have the new site up and running. I have been seeing some of the new designs on some of the pages, and it is a much improved design from what we currently have. So there'll be a lot of improvements there. But go live is January 18th.
Mayor Bean, members of the council, just as I mentioned, Hometown Holiday was a good success, despite it being what I heard was the coldest day of the year. But I guess Hometown Holiday is that coldest day of the year. Jamie Mouche and the Parks coordinator was great in collaborating with our community events, but also we can't do it without Public Works. Dave's not around tonight. Fire, I think even PD was out there at some point through the day, not only in-house, but bringing Santa to the site. So I want to thank all of them for being there. Even though there has been an economic downturn, we are still meeting with developers. You probably have seen a couple of those in those weekly recaps that you're getting out, but just so you know, we are talking on both more multifamily, some commercial development, a little bit of small scale commercial development, and then some new industrial opportunities. So some of those I do believe will be still moving forward with potential construction in 2023, but that single family residential is slowing up. And then lastly, for you, tomorrow night, the Planning Commission is going to be holding its public hearing on revisions to the MXR1 zoning district, as well as consideration for accessory dwelling units. So that'll be coming forth for the City Council's consideration in January of recommendation from the Planning Commission.
That's on Wednesday night.
What, did I say Wednesday? Oh, tomorrow's not Wednesday. No, on Wednesday night, this week.
Thank you, Abby. What time, and is that in the regular?
It is in their regular agenda, so it'll be as close after 7 o'clock as possible. We do have, the Planning Commission is considering a consent agenda. It's kind of a new item for the Planning Commission, where we're trying to explore whether or not the Planning Commission can do some of its site plan review and trust in staff to be able to do that and kind of approve them by at the consent agenda. And so there's still some of those items get pulled, but it'll be as soon after 7 o'clock as possible.
Thank you, Abby. Patrick?
Yeah, just to follow up on garbage, it usually is the tipping fees that go up. And also, most of you know that SRC is now waste management. So that's the change in the local garbage. So other things, I'd like to report Midco, our cable provider and internet provider, has received 2 grants, one from the state of Minnesota and one from Washington County, to extend cable and internet services to the rest of the town, or city, I should say. We worked with them very closely. We were a supporter. You passed a resolution supporting those grants. We also contributed a $50,000 matching. So I think that will help considerably some of the service areas that aren't really served well. It also will serve the south part of town where development will happen. They will have to put, that's part of the grant, that they'll have to put services in there. So I think that's a great development. So I would like to thank the council for passing the budget and your work on that. We greatly appreciate that. I also would like to thank this council on behalf of myself particularly, but also the staff for the last 4 years of your support. You've been a great partner. You have the vision that I think this community needs. And I think we've made a lot of progress in those 4 years. So I thank you significantly for those interactions with us. That's all I have.
And Amanda.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor and Council. Just a quick update from legal. So prior to a few weeks ago, the legal team was Peter McCall and myself, and we've sort of switched roles. And so you will be seeing me at all of the city council meetings, all of the meetings from here forward. And he'll be in the background as needed, but generally it will be me.
Excellent. Welcome to the team in a different chair.
You need a name tag.
Yeah. I'll use one, not Peter. Yes. Ryan.
Mayor, City Council, just a friendly reminder, we still are in the middle of that water efficiency grant program. So people that are on city water that could apply for rebates on washing machines, low flow toilets, dishwashers, and then obviously at this time of year, it's kind of hard, but irrigation components and controllers. Once we get back into springtime, obviously more people we get to upgrade their appliances, the better per water per capita that our ratios work out, which is only delays the other major projects that would be needed if we could get everybody in compliance on that kind of stuff too. And I'm obviously looking forward to Councilmember Munson and Viceman, what you'll be doing on Monday nights now. So we'll live through you guys. So,
We're joining the fire department.
oh, there you go. Heard it. I got two volunteers, so. And then starting out the next year, we will have a lot of conversations going on with Washington County projects and stuff that's moving forward on some things that we'll need to decide. And we'll just wait till those conversations then, just once we regroup. But there's a lot of things that Washington County wants to do and has moving forward within the city. So we'll want to be on top of that right away in the new year. So that's all I got.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. And Chief Peterson.
Yeah, Mayor and City Council members, you probably heard that on December 6th, somebody had dumped 146 tires along Forest Road, Fenway area, and 180th. And that took up a lot of police resources and public works resources to clean that up. We are taking any tips or any information anybody has that can be anonymous. And we've got a few of them we've been following up, but I would really like to talk to the individual that did that. And I will personally have them charged.
Who would like that for you?
And then next, this Thursday, we have our annual Shop with a Cop at Walmart.
Excellent.
And we are really excited. We have 12 police officers that are going to be out there helping to assist shopping with some kids. And it's always a great event. So looking forward to that. With that, nothing else unless you have questions for me.
Excellent. Thank you. Chief Newman.
Mayor and Council, I just have one update. On January 2nd, we will have 4 new paid-on-call firefighters starting, possibly 6.
These two.
Not us.
With that will bring us fully staffed
Excellent.
in the fire department.
When was the last time you were fully staffed with the fire department?
Cannot remember.
Wow. All right. Let's just keep everyone healthy and happy, and yeah, it's excellent.
Chief Newman doesn't want me.
Yeah. Was
No other
fully
updates.
staffed
I'll
code.
direct traffic.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Kim,
No updates, thank you.
Kevin.
No further updates. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Councilmember Munson.
I don't have an update, but just wanted to take a minute to thank the residents for allowing me to serve the last 4 years, and my fellow council members. I'm proud of the work that we got done despite global pandemic. Someone had told me that. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have believed it more that I was going to willingly jump in a frozen lake. Wouldn't have believed it. And then just, I really want to thank the city staff. It's so great to see the team that's been built over these last 4 years, and it's in good hands. So excited to see where this goes. And I should clarify, so it's not in the Forest Lake Times, we are not joining the fire department. But thank you.
Right. Well, and thank you. Really appreciate your service. You leave big shoes to fill. Councilmember Byström.
Just one quick update from me. I have been in touch with community members in the southeast quadrant of the city around the broadband grant since 2020. And you have no idea how thrilled they are to hear Midco's coming their way. So they really appreciated the city's persistence in getting that work done, and wanted me to extend their gratitude to city staff for all of that. I don't have a whole lot more I can add, to what Kelly had to say. I just want to acknowledge this council. From day one, I never doubted the intention of this group of people sitting up here, that they had nothing but the best interest of the city at heart. And I mean that broadly. I never felt like we were working through agendas or those sorts of things. We just really took it issue by issue and wanted to do our best work, as a team up here. And to city staff, I again would echo Kelly's comments that I just am really proud of the team that's been built here. And I think on a personal level, I wish we had accomplished a little more, but COVID had bigger plans. I really wanted to see North Shore done, and Eureka and Forest Road. And
They're on the plan. There's a plan.
I know there's a plan, but I wanted them
I
complete.
know.
So, but COVID had bigger plans on some of those pieces. And then finally, I just really appreciate the gentleness and the grace everyone has shown me this last year. Whether it's making a wrong motion or momentarily forgetting my Roman numerals, I just appreciate everybody picking me up and moving me forward, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, right. Nobody else made a mistake.
Yes.
Well, I can't believe that. Whew.
Well, we appreciate your service as well, and just thank you for everything you've done for all of the residents and city, and just leaving us in a good place. So really appreciate it.
Councilmember Husnick.
Thank you. I attended the tree lighting ceremony. That was cold. Oh.
It's always cold.
Sure. Anyways, then I attended the Forest Lake School Board meeting here that took place last Thursday, and they did their truth and taxation hearing. That was at 6 o'clock. And I'm just going to kind of go make sure I don't skip anything here, but they do their reports just like we do. Everybody has, and they talk about their consent agenda, which is, minutes and bills from December and that kind of thing. So, but a couple notable things is that they received $15,500 in donations, and they report on those every month. Interesting thing too is that Dr. Massey talked about, the buses and still the issues they're still having and that sort of thing. But our buses drive 5,500 miles a day, totally. You liken it, you go from Tampa to Anchorage every day. So, that's a big deal. It's a lot of maintenance and a lot of fuel and lots of expenses and that kind of thing. And then, of course, their new business, they talk about all the policies, out-of-state travel, and employee alcohol use and all that kind of stuff. And so that was about it. And the other thing, I just want to take the time to thank Kelly Munson and Kathy Byström for 4 years of service to this council, and it's been a pleasure, very much so. And I just hope that you stay involved. I think you will. I think you do. And keep people's feet to the fire and that kind of thing. So thanks for 4 years. Appreciate it very much.
Member Valento.
Nothing besides that Kathy and Kelly, you will both be missed. And just like Sam said, I hope to see you here You can still come on Mondays. We will appreciate you being in the audience. But yeah, I hope to see you both around, and it's been a pleasure serving with you two for the last 2 years. You've both have taught me a lot, and I couldn't be more grateful for serving with you both.
Well, I'll just pick up that and again, wish you both the just very best. And you both have been always been involved in the community. I expect that that will be the case going forward. And so happy to work with you in whatever that next capacity is. And just really thank you for everything that you've done. Much appreciated. Also, just by way of updates, this traditionally is our last meeting of the month, or last meeting of the month, also last meeting of the year. And so unless something were to happen in the next couple of weeks where we needed to meet, and that always could happen, this would be our last meeting. And so just really an opportunity to just thank everyone for a great year. We made a ton of budget progress this year. I think back to the meeting we had for the property tax appeal process, and we had a room of just very angry residents very concerned about where we were going to head with property taxes. And for us to land then, to hear that feedback and now to land at a 6.9% increase, which is essentially maybe even less than what some numbers for inflation are, in a year where we had two very sizable contracts come up for renewal, and just all of the projects we've continued to push forward, I just think is really just a lot of hard work goes into those results. And I look at it as a flat budget from a rate perspective, but made a lot of progress. And so I'm not sure we can ask more out of us. And so just really think everyone should just feel proud about that. And just thanks for all of that work and getting done. And also just the opportunity to wish everyone a very happy holiday season. And there's never a shortage of things to do. And so I suspect 2023 is going to be also filled with lots of activity. And so take an opportunity to just reflect and refresh, and look forward to working with everyone in 2023. So with that, I would entertain, actually, we are going to move into a closed session. And if somebody want to move us into that closed session?
One last time.
I can. Sure, one last time, sure. I move to close the meeting pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05 Subdivision 3A for the City Administrator Annual Review. The closed session will be held in the Forest Lake Conference Room and will commence immediately. Once the closed session is completed, the City Council will reconvene the open meeting portion in council chambers. Once back in session, the council will adjourn the regularly scheduled council meeting.
And I'll second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're in closed session.
I missed you. I'm just falling apart up here.
I was gonna let Kelly do it.
That's from my personal observation.
And
You do a great
I,
job of empowering
we are
us.
back in open session, and I would move to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and we're adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Oh, we could have